Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back to another narrator interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is a narrator making their official debut here on the show. Now, my guest today is a talented voice actor known for her captivating performances across various media, including television, radio, podcasts, video games, and of course, audiobooks. Originally hailing from a diverse background, she grew up in Japan, Singapore, Virginia, Russia, and is currently based in New York City. She holds a BFA in acting from New York University Tisch School of the Arts, where she trained in the Miser Extension Classical Studio and Experimental Theater Wing, apologies, with exceptional skills that include conversational Russian, beginner level Italian, and an ear for Eastern European accents. She has a keen ear for dialects and, of course, voices. In addition to her voice acting skills, she also enjoys exploring the finer things in life, such as visiting the Museum of Modern Art or MOMA, hiking, camping, and delving into RPG games and language studies. Her favorite genres to narrate are sci-fi, fantasy, young adult, mystery, thriller, and historical fiction, especially stories featuring a plucky heroine navigating extraordinary circumstances. So, without further ado, let us give a huge round of applause to our guest today, narrator and voice actor Gillian Wiggin. Gillian, welcome to the show.
Hi, Gabriel. Thank you so much. That was an amazing. You make me sound so good. I feel so happy.
Awesome, Gillian. Awesome. I am so excited to have you here. And I have to say, having the opportunity to look at your profile on Instagram and also your website, I have to say, you have quite the array, quite the talents that you have shown in the various mediums that you have worked on, as mentioned in your bio, from voice acting, video games, podcasting, radio. You are truly a jack of all trades in the voice acting industry.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to work in a lot of different genres and a lot of different mediums just using my voice. It's been really incredible.
That's amazing, Jillian. That is incredible. Now, as a little teaser slash icebreaker question, can you give us some examples of some of the latest work that you have lent your voice to?
Sure, yeah. So some recent books I've done. I've been doing a lot of historical fiction lately, which is something that I really, really love. I did a book about Canada. It was kind of a historical mystery, I'd call it. Yeah, it was so much fun. And it's based on a real story of a woman who basically in very, very early 19th century Canada ended up running her own business, running a lumber mill after her husband died. And her husband died under very mysterious circumstances. And then she very quickly remarried his much younger protege. And so a question of the book is, what happened? Did her husband die of natural causes? Was it an accident? All of these things. And the book kind of takes you through her amazing life and all of the things she accomplished. And also this central question of like, what happened to her first husband? And if anything happened, was it justified to be able to give her this life of freedom that she had always been craving? So that was a really great project to work on. And that book is called Submit, which is the main character's name and also the central theme of the book, like submitting to what is expected of you, submitting to society. So that was really great. I also recently did a book that I loved called, this is a sci-fi, called Redemption. And I loved it because one of the things I love about sci-fi is what I call like quiet sci-fi, where it's kind of like our everyday kind of life, but something has happened. It's like, what if we followed this scientific principle out to its fullest extent? And so in Redemption, what that is that's about what would happen essentially if mammals, and not even just mammals, all creatures could no longer have children. What would that do to our society? What would happen, and how would things devolve? And it's like, very practical things like, well, pretty soon, if there's no children being born, you don't need daycares anymore. You don't need schools anymore as they start getting older and older. And then you have, children and the young people having to take care of the old people. And then like, what's going to happen when you're the last person on Earth? I find that really exciting, like thinking about those kind of philosophical things. So those were a couple of projects that I really enjoyed working on. Yeah.
Ooh, nice. Very, very nice. And also, speaking of video games, have you worked on any recent games in your career?
I haven't done anything recently with video games. I have done a couple of versions of World of Warcraft.
Ooh, okay.
It is like this funny thing because like it was like very early on in my career that I started doing that. And it really just kind of fell into my lap. So I'm a character in a couple of different versions. An NPC named Lorna Crowley, I believe, and it's in the werewolf world of World of Warcraft in Legion and Cataclysm, I believe are the versions. And it was like such an amazing experience, and getting to do things like, okay, now we've done all your like, all of the lines you say, but now we need to do like all of the combat sounds. So this one, imagine that you're getting slapped across the face. And now this one, a little bit bigger reaction. You're getting like punched in the stomach, and it goes like all the way until you're doing like death cries. So that was an amazing experience.
Awesome. So now that begs the question, is there any facts that maybe a lot of people may not know about you?
Oh my gosh. Voiceover related, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of an open book. I feel like there's just so many other things I want to do. I haven't had the opportunity yet to do any romance. No, I've done a little bit, but I'd like to do more romance. So maybe that's something I'll put out into the universe, is like, I would love to do a little bit more, get some more romance titles, I think is something that I haven't really put out there that much.
All right, all right. And that actually kind of leads into some of our beginning questions before we go more into the nitty gritty, the behind the scenes of the Narrator voice actor studios. So going back to your bio, Gillian, you have been a part of the voice acting creative world for a very, very long time. You have worked in theater. You have traveled all over the world growing up, picking up accents and dialects along the way. So I am very curious. What would you consider to be definitively the aha moment that really put you on this path to dive into the works of voice acting, acting, and narration?
Okay, that's a really good question. So when I went to NYU, I went being like, I'm going to do theater, and that's what I want to do. And then kind of immediately being in this place of like, I want to do Shakespeare, like I want to do classical theater, which is, I always laugh. I'm like, it's because I don't like making money, I think. Like, I'm like, no, I want to just do Shakespeare. And when I graduated, I was lucky enough to get to do theater in New York and get to do regional theater. I got to travel to Paris with a show. And so I got to do a lot of things. And they were all really great. But I found it's a really hard life. And it always, for me, was a bit of a struggle. And I had a commercial agent at the time, and I was going out for a lot of like TV on camera auditions, and they were going fine. And I got one voiceover audition and I booked it. And suddenly I was in this world with voiceover where things just were happening in a way that felt really easy and really organic. and really exciting. And I realized like, oh, I have something to offer, and I have something that people are interested in and curious about. So I was doing mostly commercial voiceover for quite a while. And from my theater days, I have a few really good friends who are pretty established audiobook narrators. And they kept saying, like, you should do audiobooks. You should do audiobooks. Why aren't you doing audiobooks? And I was like, I don't know. And part of the reason was that I have 2 young children. And the great thing about commercials is it's fast. You know, you get in, you get out, and it doesn't take a lot of time. And audiobooks take a lot of time in the booth. But as soon as my younger kid started full-time school, I had a lot more time on my hands. And I thought, okay, this is the moment to start exploring this. And I did, and I fell in love with it. And so it's been kind of like, I'd say like a few aha moments, like kind of slowly as time has gone on. And it's nice to have the dream kind of shift and take different shapes as I've gotten older and as I've learned more about myself and different crafts.
All right, Gillian. So now let's actually dive into some of the behind the scenes. So when you decide to take the plunge into the world of voice acting and narration, what really surprised you initially about the industry that you didn't know before?
Sure. So specifically with audiobook narration, I think something that surprised me is everyone is very, very nice, and everyone is very, very approachable. And it's a really lovely, positive space where people just, narrators and publishers and authors, everyone just wants you to do your best. And everyone's just excited to see what you can bring. And so it's been a lovely experience. Because for me, I found it to be the most supportive, creative environment that I've been a part of, for sure.
Excellent. So now let's talk about the first project you've ever recorded when you began this career of yours. Now, when you began this journey of yours, did you have a ritual or routine that really worked for you? And the reason why I ask this is because some of the narrators that I've had on the show, a lot of them who are also parents and have children, had to realize, okay, if I'm going to be a narrator and work on a project, I need to find a schedule that works best for me. And 9 times out of 10, all of them agree it's usually work in the evening, only because that's when everybody is asleep and not a lot of interruptions. Was that almost the same case for you when you began?
I think for me, this is something that I've learned about myself over the years, is for me, like working at night is bad news bears. It makes me like, I'm someone, and I think the way that I'm framing it for myself is I'm someone that's very sensitive to burnout. And so I'm someone that like I have to think about my load, what I'm carrying very, very specifically. And the thing that I've learned for myself is like I need the evenings as much as I can to be for myself, so that then the next day I can go out and do what I need to do. But what that means is, so I'm working during the day, breakneck speed, getting as much as I can done before my kids come home. And then if I do need to work in the evening, I do. But the goal is always to not have to work in the evening, and sometimes work on the weekend, which is hard. But for the most part, I'm trying to get my work done in the hours between 8 and 2 before they get home.
All right. Now, when it comes to planning out your day, do you consider yourself to be an outliner or more of a pantser, that you would just do things sporadically or at the moment if you felt in the creative space?
So I've changed over the years. I think initially I was very much like, I just like fly by the seat of my pants, and when the moment strikes, I'll do what I want. But I've learned that, and I think having kids is part of this too, right? Is like you need to have the structure to be able to let yourself, or for me at least, have the creativity, right? So I
Mm.
do outline my day. Like I actually like make a little like notes thing with like check boxes next to it. And I'm like, I kind of plan out everything. Like I'm like, oh, I have to walk the dog in the morning. And then I'm going to be in the booth from here until here. And then after that, I'm going to make lunch, because doing that allows me to like see what I've accomplished and allows me to like plan ahead. And so when I'm in those creative moments, I'm not thinking about what else needs to get done. I'm able to just be where I am.
All right. All right. And now, kind of a little bit more personal question. Do you remember what it was like meeting your first ever author to be a part of their audiobook lineup of narrators? What was that feeling like?
It's so exciting. I mean, I feel like it's always so exciting when someone's like, hey, I want you to voice my book. It's such an exciting moment. And especially like the first book I did, I was really excited to do, and I was really inspired by. And so it's really thrilling to know that you've put something out there to say like, hey, this is what I would bring, like in an audition, to your book. And to have someone who created that listen to it and go, oh my gosh, absolutely, that's what I want. Like, this is the person that is understanding what I want. So it's a great moment of connection.
Excellent. And kind of a little bit more on the technical side, as you know, doing these interviews for 3 years now, and now interviewing narrators in the last year and a half, I've come to understand that when it comes to narrating characters, there is a craft to them because it is acting. A lot of people have the assumption that it's just a funny voice in a recording booth. No, it is acting. It is a lot of research. It is, trying to find the voice that makes sense for the character. And that's another thing that I like to talk with my guests, especially narrators, because for characters in different genres, there has to be a distinct voice that makes sense for that character in that world. It's that authenticity. So for you, Gillian, when working on that first audiobook, how did you ensure that the character or characters that you were voicing had that authenticity and that it made sense for those characters to exist in the world that they belong to?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So the first book I ever did was called Darkness and Dawn, and it was about vampires in
Ooh.
the 1700s. And it was this
Ooh,
whole story
okay.
of and based on, historical facts, the little bits of women sent from France to the New World who had been accused of witchcraft, but women who had been sent from France to the New World as brides. And then in this book, one of them is a witch who kind of sneaks on board the ship. It was a lot of fun. But so things to think about were the age of the characters. So the lead character was 17. So that's going to affect it. Also, we're talking about a period in the past, and the text was not written in like a contemporary speech. So trying to think about like how someone might talk, like instead of, sounding really, really like flat and contemporary, like just somebody that you'd meet today, that the voice might sound a little bit more heightened. Also, then, there's a lot of vampires that you have to voice. And what does it mean to narrate a 100-year-old vampire? And like, what kind of style does that require? And like, what does it require when, they're putting on the semblance of being a human versus when they're not, right? So there's a lot of playing around with that. The main things I think about in general when I'm creating a character voice is I think about, first of all, looking at the text and seeing what the author has written. So, If it says he has a gravelly voice, he's got to have a gravelly voice, right? If it says she speaks really fast, she's got to speak fast, but be understood as well. So always going back to the text and then thinking about the pace of the character and trying to make sure that all the characters don't speak at the same pace, that they all kind of have their own rhythm and cadence. And then also the pitch, the tone. I think of something that I learned in voice class is the placement. Like, is it more in the mask or is it more in the throat? And those are all things those are tools at your disposal.
All right, nice. And kind of a little fan question, first of many, Gillian. One of my viewers would like to know, throughout your career in the voice acting world, who has been your favorite character to narrate and the most difficult character, plus
Oh my gosh.
favorite and most difficult scene that you've narrated?
Oh, interesting. Okay, let me think about it. I did a book last year that I also really loved. That was great. Historical fiction, based on true events of, it follows the story of a woman growing up in Ukraine under Soviet regime and all of the things that she goes through. And it's a very intense book and really, really beautiful. It's called Dunya, and it's really wonderful. There was a whole chapter voiced as a 8-year-old boy.
Ooh, okay.
And not only is he just an 8-year-old boy, he's an 8-year-old boy going through an incredibly heightened, upsetting moment, which is that and this is historically did happen in Ukraine. There was a famine, and he and his family are starving. They're starving. And so the whole chapter is from his point of view. So the question becomes, as a narrator, how do you do an 8-year-old boy voice without making it sound like a cartoon and without making it sound like something, without like making it sound like something that someone would be able to listen to, right? As opposed to like, be like, oh my gosh, you sound like kind of annoying, right? Because you want the listener to be able to experience and understand what this child is going through. So that, I would say, that was vocally, I think that kind of answers all of them. That was incredibly vocally challenging to try to figure out how to be authentic to the character while also being listenable and do the most important thing, which is get the story across to the listener in the way the author intended.
Ooh, all right, all right. And this is another fan question, and kind of the first new fan question of 2026, because I like the discussion that it has within it. And this viewer asks, in your opinion, Gillian, do you believe that narrators and voice actors who work in radio have more creative freedom than those who work in traditional audiobooks? And they go forward to give a more long example in terms of narration and prose, because in a radio drama, if something doesn't phonetically or verbally sound correct, you can just change it to match the natural flow. Whereas in a traditional audiobook, that's not always the case, because you're trying to recreate the author's exact wording, even if, unfortunately, that wording or that prose may not make sense.
Yeah, I think in that context, it's really, I think there's truth to that for sure, in that, like, my experiences with like radio dramas or like podcast dramas has been, you're, in a room with a director, or on Zoom with a director, and often the writer's there too. And so if something's not working, they're able to be like, okay, we'll just change it. Or oh, you can do something like this, or you can just ad lib something. Like, this is like our idea, but you can kind of use your own words here if you want.
Right.
So there's more ability, I would say. But I also will say I really enjoy having the I enjoy the constraint. I think maybe it's kind of the same thing of like I like to plan out my day. Like I
All
like
right.
having a container to work in. And so I enjoy kind of being like, okay, well, this isn't necessarily how I would say this, but I have to make it work. I have to try to make this make sense. I think that comes a bit from did a lot of Shakespeare training and
Mhm.
taught a lot of Shakespeare too. And like that's not how I would express myself, but like it's such a great challenge to have to try to make it work, right?
Right, absolutely. So now we're gonna go a little caveat a little bit to talk about, family, friends, and colleagues. And the reason why I bring this up is that I'm always interested to learn about from my guests what was their friends, their inner circle's reaction when they made this announcement that they were going on this path. So I'm very curious, Gillian, when did you tell your friends and family that you were embarking on this new venture for you? And what has the reaction been like from not just them, but also from the people that you've worked with?
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, really positive, I would say. It's been really nice. For my like close friends, it's really sweet. I'm just thinking like my sister-in-law was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you." Like it's been incredibly positive. And I've gotten a lot of support from family and friends. For my friends in the industry, like the people who have been audiobook narrators for a long time, it's been really
Mhm.
sweet. Like they've been like, "Oh, finally, like we're so happy you're here and like let me give you all this advice and like here's what you should do and here's what you should do." Um Again, that thing of like audiobook narrators just being so incredibly lovely. Um, and it's been it's been really great, you know. It's been, I would say, incredibly positive.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And kind of another little semi fan question. Now, when you embarked on this journey of yours, I imagine you had so many promises that you're making to yourself, as well as so many goals you wanted to meet. Looking back on that and seeing how far you've come in your journey, has your goal and promise remained the same, not just to yourself as a narrator and the main voice behind the project you've been assigned to, but also to the authors and the clients that you've been working with?
Yeah. Yeah, I think something that I'm really happy about is that I have made a promise to myself that when I work on a book, I'm really going to give myself over to the book
Mm,
and that I'm not going to do the thing of like, well, I'm just doing this because I need the money. Or like, I'm just, it's a credit. So I'm just going to do it and like, whatever. That I really allowed myself to care and allowed myself to like put my best effort forward for every book I've done. Um, and I think that's really helped me. And I think that makes the work a lot more enjoyable when you're able to just say like, yes, this is what I want to do. And like, this is the author's baby and I'm going to take care of this baby and I'm going to do like the best I can. And I'm going to put my whole self into it. Um, Instead of kind of holding it at arm's length and going like, well, I don't know. I'm just, doing this like as a side thing or like, um, yeah. And so that's something that I'm really happy that I feel like I've made that promise to myself and I really have kept that promise. Because I think I feel that if I'm not able to do work that I'm proud of, like there's no reason to do it then.
very true, Jillian. And like all creatives, sometimes we have off days. I know as an author, I've had days where I did not want to write absolutely whatsoever. And I imagine for you as a narrator, things in life probably have popped up that have probably had to force you to step away from the recording booth for a good number of days. Or even not just that, but also just being in a creative funk where you can't, you know, go back to a character's voice that you've been working on so far, especially if that character has a distinct accent. I've talked with a lot of colleagues on the show about this particular topic, and it's a little frustrating because, you know, even though you have the recordings of the voice, you're trying to think of, okay, how would I find that voice? What cue words did I say, you know, get that voice back, so to speak. So I'm very curious for you, Gillian, as a fellow creative, how do you deal with the dreaded narrator's block? And as a follow-up to that, have you ever encountered or dealt with the dreaded imposter syndrome? And if so, how did you overcome it or deal with it?
Great questions. I would say in terms of narrator's block, something that's really helped me is to really do a lot of prep work before I even step into the booth. So I'm, you know, recording myself doing sample lines. I'm making sure that I have it in a way that I can click into something, even if I'm not feeling it on that day, right? That like there are times where like we have to move forward because of, you know, time constraints or whatever. We have to move forward, even if everything is not perfectly aligned, right? And like it comes back to my acting training too, which is that like, you know, on the best day in a play, you don't have to rely on, you know, emotional preparation, which is like getting into the emotional place that you start in the
Right.
scene before. Like on the best day, you're just in the moment and everything's flowing and you don't have to do anything, right? But the reason why we train, the reason why we do prep work, the reason why we make sure that we have it on lock is so that in those incredibly normal moments, when it's not flowing, we're still able to give an excellent performance. And we don't have to rely on the gods of theater or voice acting to propel us forward because we have our own skills. That's what I try to do. And then on really tough days, I'll just take a break and say like, okay, we'll come back to it. But also I do think it's connected to imposter syndrome. Because something that I have found for myself is like, you know, you'll listen back to something and go like, oh gosh, I don't know. Or like be in the booth and feel like, oh, it's not clicking. It's not clicking. And then you'll record something else and you'll be like, oh, wow, that was really clicking. And then you'll listen back to both and you'll be like, well, they both sound really good, right? Like sometimes like what we feel isn't what's happening in reality. And I'm someone that definitely suffers from imposter syndrome. I'm definitely someone that is like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. But the one thing that's really helped me is, you know, no one knows what they're doing. This is our first time on this planet for everyone, I think. And we're all, you know, trying to figure it out as we go along. And so like, I have a right to do that just as much as anyone else. And if I am prepared and if I am ready and I'm doing my best, like that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of another fan question before I get into some of the reflective questions. This was actually brought up in a previous interview. I want to say it was last month from a guest, a fellow narrator. And I love asking this answer that she had to a question that I asked her, and now formatting it into a question, which is, in your opinion, Gillian, do you believe that narrators can be voice actors, but voice actors may struggle being narrators?
It's a different muscle for sure. Like being a voice actor, like you're like doing a commercial, it's like 2 sentences. And you get to do it like a bunch of ways, and they'll be like, actually, can you go up on this line? And like it's a completely different muscle. Whereas narration, you're in the booth for hours, you're doing pages on pages on pages on pages of text. And so I think it's a really different mode. And it requires different skills for sure.
Absolutely. Very true. Very, very true. And this kind of goes into my big reflective question, which I've always had as two separate, but a lot of people said that they work well together as a very loaded question. So I'm going to give you a lot of context for this one, Gillian. So ultimately, this question asks, what does it mean to be a narrator in the digital age? Because for any creative in general in the digital age, the industry has greatly changed. For authors, there are more indies than traditional, relatively speaking. For editors, those are also on the rise. Artists, freelancers, those are also on the rise, competing with studios who are creating book covers for authors and artwork for them to sell. And more specifically, or more intentionally, we also see the rise of new narrators. We have just average, everyday people who just have incredible talent, who are passionate about voiceover work, may not have the professional training as others, but they're able to still give some of the best performances than anyone else. And you definitely do see this shift. I mean, if you look back 20 years ago for voice acting and narration, you had a lot of people from the world of theater, from movies, from TV being the narrators for audiobooks. And you still do. You still do. But now you see the next generation of creatives stepping up. You have everyday people who are talented about voice acting and narration, who have done the research, done the work, and they want to showcase that. And they may naturally have the voice that suits radio, the golden voice, as they have been told. And this has also led to another discussion with the rise of artificial narration, which I'm sure you have seen and have a lot of comments on as a narrator yourself, which has sparked this discussion of what kind of age are we in? A lot of people, such as myself, began our careers during the lockdown period, and that became a hub for all creatives. And when the floodgates opened, we took the industry by storm. Now, some would argue that the market is oversaturated if you look at from the author's perspective, and same thing with the narrator's perspective. And in less than 5 years, artificial intelligence, generative AI specifically, has been, the demon that a lot of creatives are afraid of. Now, AI is going to be a part of every software, no matter what. A lot of narrators know that AI is in their recording software and they can't change that. But what they do have an issue with is generative AI, which not only in some cases may write the scripts they are reading, in some horrible cases, AI voices will narrate an entire book, sometimes taking the voice of an established narrator without their consent. I know at least a few people that have had that issue, and it's very, very damaging, and it mass produces a false sense of creativity, and a lot of people are not happy with it. So ultimately, Gillian, my question for you is this. In the wake of all of that, and not to mention, of course, social media, which is also a huge thing, which is a double-edged sword, what has still disciplined you to still be true to yourself as a narrator and as a voice actor in an industry that is ever changing, and in some cases teetering to what some have called a digital dark age regarding the abuse of AI to generate content, as opposed to it being a tool to help creatives as it was intended?
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Okay. So okay, what keeps me going in this dark digital age with AI, which I completely agree with. I don't like generative AI. I don't like it in writing. And I feel like I can tell when it's happening. I feel like I'm like, I don't know about this. I think this is not written by a human. And with AI narration, I think the way that I feel about that is, I think the people who care about the human touch in art aren't going to be using AI voices or AI at all. And the people who don't are not people that I want to work with. Like, that's never going to be a good fit for me if the way that I am viewed is as a product as opposed to a collaborator, right? Like,
Right.
That's kind of my thing, is that, like, really what audiobook narration is, in my opinion, is it's me getting a book from an author and saying, this is my interpretation of what you have done. And it requires a lot of trust, and it
Yes.
requires a lot of, vulnerability on an author's part to say, like, here's what I've made and you get to do something with what I've made. But I think in that vulnerability and trust, that is where the magic of audiobooks happens. And I think if you're using AI, you're not able to trust and you're not collaborating, and it's about control. And I think then there doesn't need to be an audiobook. If there cannot be a communication and a creative process between two human beings or more than two human beings, I think that an audiobook doesn't have to happen, is kind of my opinion. And I think that, I think we're in this time and this place, and it's this hard thing about, like, society where there's this idea of productivity, right? And, like, you need to do this and make this and constantly be working. I remember this was years ago, but it was something like in my theater days. I had just gotten back from doing a show in Paris, and it was this really wonderful experience. And I got back that afternoon and I went to see a friend's show, and I saw someone in the audience that I knew kind of socially. And he asked me, like, oh, what are you working on right now? And I said, oh, well, I don't have anything right now, but I just got back from this great gig in France. It was so amazing. And I was talking to him about it. And he said, oh, so you don't have anything right now? Oh, that really sucks. And I was like, that's really hard, right? That, like, it's always like on to the next thing, more. We're constantly in this place of, like, you're only as good as your last gig, right? And I think AI puts us in this kind of desperate place, this place of anxiety of, like, oh, well, I have to get this book out now. Oh, I have to get the audiobook out. Now. I need the cover done right now. I can't wait. Whereas I think the struggle with that is that creativity often lies in slowness and in stillness and allowing yourself to have the time and ability to listen to your creative self. But it's hard. It's really hard. But I think at the end of the day, the way I feel about AI is, I think that using generative AI is not what art is about. And I think that the whole point of audiobooks is human connection. And I think there's no way for AI to replace human connection.
Very true. Very, very true. And that perfectly segues into what I like to call the business side of being a narrator. So as an icebreaker question to these, when you began your career, Gillian, and you were promoting yourself, trying to get your name out there into the interwebs, looking back on your journey thus far, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of promoting yourself to authors and to other clients?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that imposter syndrome thing again,
Mm-hmm.
where like I was like, well, I haven't done enough yet. Like, I don't think I'm ready. And then like you'll look at people that are bolder than me who don't like have that same block. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're amazing. And you've done like half the number of books I've done, but look how far you've gotten because you don't have this thing of like, well, I need to wait until I'm not, until I've done this number of books or I've done this sort of thing. And I think that's amazing. And that's something that I want to emulate, kind of not being afraid of putting myself out there, because I do think that's something that, everyone in this industry has something unique to offer and something there's a book out there for every single audiobook narrator that's like the perfect book for them. I do believe that. And so like, but you have to get out there to find the book, right? So I think for myself, looking back, I would have said like, be bold. Like you can go and like reach out to people now because you're ready.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, 100%. So now let's talk about another major thing when we talk about the marketing side of narration. That is understanding one's audience. Now, as you mentioned in your bio, Gillian, you love working in sci-fi, fantasy, historical fiction, mystery, thriller, and so forth. And the reason I bring this up is that those genres, all genres, sorry, have a certain expectation of how a story is not only supposed to be told and read, but have a certain ambience to it. The narration has to match the voice that is reading it. And I know a lot of people are very critical about that. Same thing from an author's perspective. If an author is writing a mystery thriller book, people in that genre have certain expectations of how that story is supposed to go. And it's this tightrope act where you don't want to, from an author's perspective, write something that's so familiar that it's going to be seen as just a knockoff version, but something too original that it's going to throw people off. And I imagine that's the same thing for narrators. It's this balance. They want to narrate a story that is familiar, but they don't want to be seen as trying to copy somebody else. I'll give a really good example. A good friend of mine told me that their colleague, who was also in the narration industry, was working on a series of books. And the reason they brought this up is that they were the new narrator involved, because there had been a narrator that had been assigned to this project for a long period of these books. And the readers had become accustomed to that particular voice. To them, that is the narrator. When this new person was brought in, because I don't know the full details, I assume possibly they couldn't commit because they had other projects, which sometimes does happen. This again goes back to that imposter syndrome. Was, are people going to, take me seriously? Are they going to give me the chance to read this series of books or continue this series that they become accustomed to, even if my voice is not the same? I don't want to copy that narrator, but I don't want to make a voice that's too different or foreign. So ultimately, Gillian, the question I pose to you is this. As a narrator, how do you balance those two thoughts into your head when you are working on either a new book with a new author or a series of books that have had similar instance or maybe something completely different?
Yeah, well, because each genre can have its own, like, tend to have its own kind of way that the narration's done. Joel Frumkin, the narrator and teacher, like audiobook narration teacher, he's really great. And he's talked about this, that one way that he likes to think of it is like, I'm trying to think exactly of what he said because it was so good. But I can't remember the phrase he used, but it's kind of like how close it is, how intimate your relationship is with the listener, right? Is it like there's one person and they're right here, and so you're keeping things kind of close to your chest, or is it more like presentational, right? And that can really depend on the book, and the genre can be a part of that, right? And so I think that's something that like the genre then can inform your decision as a narrator of like what kind of story you're telling. Is it a big expressive story, or is it a closed, reserved story? Okay, so that's my thought on that. And then I'm sorry, can you remind me of the second part of the question?
Okay, so the second part of the question ultimately could be summarized as knowing one's audience. So as a narrator, how do you keep in mind the audience in regard to the multiple other factors going through your head? Knowing your voice, not wanting to be too different, but not a knockoff of someone else's performance, and then all that and more.
Yeah. So I think in some ways it's just kind of getting back to basics and trying to it's like, all that stuff, and then you just have to let it all go and be like, okay, I'm telling this story. Who am I telling this story to? Like, for instance, the story that I was referring to earlier, Dunya, the Ukrainian story, in my mind, that's me telling this story to a descendant of the main character, right? So that's the relationship, and everything else kind of falls into line once you get that relationship correct and clicked in. Yeah, but I think it's hard. Like, taking over a series halfway through is really hard. It's kind of like understudying in theater, like, because you have to hit the same beats, you have to do like similar things, because you don't want to throw people completely off, but you also can't just mimic someone. So it's working within this like framework of like that's more limited than what you would work with normally. Yeah.
Very true. Very, very true. And now we're going to go into what I like to call the rapid fire round of questions. And these are all fan questions, by the way. So I'm really, really interested to hear your thoughts on. So we'll start with the first one. In your opinion, what is probably the most difficult physical sense to emulate in narration?
It's funny. I actually think like laughter and like actual like joy can be really hard to do. I find like fear and like pain, I find those to be okay. But like if someone finds something really funny, that can be hard to do in an authentic way.
All right. In your opinion, what truly makes an audiobook production truly immersive?
Ooh, I think what makes it immersive, it can just be one narrator, but it requires like full commitment. It requires someone to be like, all right, we're going to go tell this story together. Let's jump into the pool, and like take you on that journey. So I think commitment would be my answer.
All right. Next one. Any pre-recording rituals that you have to do?
Well, I always do a vocal warm-up. I always kind of stretch a little. I always put on a ton of chapstick because my lips get really dry. And I always make sure I've walked my dog so he doesn't bark.
All right. Next one. Ooh, this is a good one. Biggest misconception people outside the industry have about narrators and voice actors?
Oh, for narrators, it's that it's just reading and it's not acting. It's just like people think audiobooks aren't reading. It's so silly. It's like audiobook narration is acting. So that would be the biggest misconception. And also that voice acting is just doing silly voices. It all has to be grounded from a place.
Absolutely, very true. And this one actually goes more into another aspect that you do, which is accents. Most difficult accent to perform in a recording?
I mean, I had to do, it really depends. I would say accents that scare me, that I can specifically think of, like a South African accent, I find really
Ooh,
difficult because it easily goes into different things. And then you're like, oh no, now I'm doing like Southern US, or like, oh no, now I'm Australian. And so like trying to keep that in line, that I would be going to a coach for that one.
absolutely. Absolutely. Ooh, okay. This one's a new one. I have not seen this one yet.
Boy.
So this viewer sent over, have you ever had to turn a client away?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. I've done it a couple times. One time I did it. The book was lovely. The author was lovely. But I didn't feel comfortable doing it. And so I steered her in the direction of another narrator that would be a perfect fit. And that worked out great for them. So I'm happy, because like sometimes there are books where you're just like, this is not like the book for me. Like it's, written from the perspective of someone from like, a specific background that's not my background, like, a different ethnic or racial background. And I'm not going to do that if it's the main character. Like that's not my story to tell. And so in those circumstances, I will like refer an author to someone else.
All right. Ooh, here's another good one. Oh, okay. I like this one. This is a really good one. So this question asks, if a famous author reached out to you asking you to narrate one of their books,
Oh
who would that author be,
my
and
gosh.
what book would you want to narrate?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, my favorite author is Kazuo Ishiguro. He's my favorite, and I love him. His books make me cry. I mean, a lot of his stuff, it's with an English accent, but I mean, I'd love to do like Clara and the Sun. I really loved that book a lot. And it's like the perfect, like kind of sci-fi dystopian. It's so and beautiful. I love it.
All righty. All righty. Next one. Oh, okay. Whoever gave me this question, they know of my good friend. This has stumped her. And they ask, what is the one word or phrase that has consistently stumped you in narration?
I thought about this the other day, and it's so like, I feel like it's so ironic, but it's really true. The word that every time I see it, I'm like, oh no, here we go, is effortlessly.
Oh my gosh. I literally have a friend that goes through the exact same thing.
Really? Oh, good. I'm so
Yes.
glad. Because I'm always like, oh no, he effortlessly moved I just find it's a lot of different sounds. Like I find it incredibly difficult.
Yes, I have a good friend who also struggles with that. That and another word. I forgot what it was, but yes. Oh my gosh. I gotta tell her about this
Oh, I'm so
later on
happy.
today. All righty. Next. Ooh, okay. This is another good one.
Hmm.
What is the one book that other people request that you narrate, but you would not narrate?
It's hard to think about because I'm like, I'll do anything. I never want to say never, but like there are some things that like things can get really, really dark sometimes. And I can have a hard time with like bad things happening to children. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean like, I can think of a ton of books where bad things happen to children and I've been fine. I did this book about a child starving and it was fine. But when I feel like there can be elements of like, it's very like, ooh, it's titillating. Like, oh my gosh. Like I struggle with that, but I don't want to say like, there's nothing that I would do, but that's something that like, depending on the tone of the book could make me uncomfortable.
All right. All right. We're almost up with the rapid fires. Oh, okay. This is a good, fun one. Biggest blooper that's ever happened in a recording booth.
Oh man. Oh, I remember this was years ago. And at the time I had a booth that was kind of, I kind of fixed up my closet and I had lowered the ceiling with plywood. And in the middle of a session, the ceiling fell down. That was a pretty good one.
Oh no.
And I was like, I'm sorry, I'll call you back. Like that was pretty rough.
Alrighty. And now the final two rapid fire questions before we answer the final question. So, when do you know when a recording session is truly finished on a book?
Oh, it's so hard because like in some ways I'm like, I always want to do more. And like, there's always something that I, would wish that I would have more time to work on. But I think it comes from knowing that when you were in the booth, you did everything you could do and really, putting yourself out there and not phoning it in and like getting to the end. And when you have the feeling of like, I did it, like that's the story, I think that's when the book is done. And then when you get pickups and you fix the book.
Yes. And this kind of may be the same thing, hopefully not. But the final rapid fire question is, when do you know when a recording session is truly finished? Because I feel that that's a little bit different from knowing when to stop recording.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think like, do you mean like recording? Like you mean like at like getting pickups and everything or like for a day?
I think overall, when the book is done, like
Mm-hmm.
you've narrated all the lines, you probably have had to do a few makeups here and there,
Mm-hmm.
but you've read the final line and you realize, I'm done. This is the best that I can get this book. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to tamper with it anymore.
Yep. I think when the author says, good job. Like, I think that like, at that point, after I've recorded the whole book and I've done my pickups and I've done my edits, I think at that point, it's out of my hands and it goes back to the original owner.
Absolutely, Jillian. And now we come to the final question of this amazing narrator interview. Now, we talked about a great many things in this interview, and you provided so many great answers. So, the final question I pose to you is this. With everything we've talked about and more, what do you want people to take away from this interview about you as a narrator and voice actor? And what is your word of wisdom to the fellow narrators and voice actors who are watching or listening or both right now?
Sure. I think for people to take away from the interview with me, I think what I would say is that I hope that they take away that like all of this is about human connection and creating something together. And that we, by working together and collaborating together, can make beautiful and amazing things. And then for voice actors who are listening or, people who want to get into voice acting, I would say do it. There's a place for you and your voice is needed and that there's space for everyone.
Excellent. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we conclude this incredible narrator interview here on Tales from the Wandering Tribe. I want to give a huge thank you to Gillian Wiggin for coming on the show, making her official debut, and hopefully not the last. Now, Gillian, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect and inquire about your services as a narrator. And do you have any upcoming projects you would like to announce that people can look forward to? Any audiobooks coming out? Any productions or co-productions you may be working on with fellow narrators?
Sure. Yeah. So on social media, I'm on Instagram under my name, Gillian Wiggin. That's Gillian with a G. And in terms of upcoming projects, I have something a little different for me. I have a podcast coming out, a narrative podcast called Land Whale Murders. It's their third season. And I'm really excited. I think it's going to be coming out in the next month or two. I'm not exactly sure when, but it should be coming out soon. It's this really zany Gilded Age mystery. It's a lot of fun. So that's the next thing I have coming out.
Nice. And before we officially sign out, are there any personal shout outs you want to give to people in the interwebs, fellow narrators who have helped you along the way, friends and family?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to shout out Megan Tusing. She's an amazing narrator and coach. If anyone ever needs coaching, like for business, she's incredible. I also would love to shout out my really good friends and narrators, Carolyn Hewitt and Neil Helligers, who have been so helpful on my journey.
Awesome. I will link all that down below in the description of this video, viewers and listeners. Thank you again for joining us for another amazing narrator interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Again, a huge thank you to Gillian Wiggin for coming on the show. And if you would like to have her back in a follow-up interview or in a large first ever narrator lineup, like this video, subscribe, and comment down below. And as always, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy New Year, everyone, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Take care and bye-bye.